And then, only 6 months later, the second attack hit Manila.
This opening sequence has lots of cool visuals, and the 3 straight minutes of exposition is very expositional. But I'm not going to bury the lead. I'm going to go ahead and burst the bubble right now. Jaegers make no sense. If giant monsters ever start crawling out of the ocean, or coming from the sky, or fucking crawling out of volcanoes or anything like that, they're done. They don't stand a chance. F-16s, tanks, nukes, bombers, A-10 Warthogs, F-22s. We don't need to build these giant fucking robots that aren't even autonomous. They're just giant mechs that are controlled by pilots inside. We don't need that. And this whole thing about needing 2 pilots for 1 Jaeger, no, I'm not buying it. That just sounds like a good excuse for having a friend story in the movie, you know what I mean? We're 7 minutes into this movie. We've gotten 3 minutes of exposition, 3 minutes of suiting up into the Jaeger, and only the thinnest of character development. And I don't give a shit because the rain is looking good, this Jaeger's looking good, and we're about to see some fucking kaijus getting clobbered.
2 pilots mind melding through memories with the body of a giant machine. The deeper the bond, the better you fight.
Oh, so it's kind of like hair sex from Avatar. Got it.
We will authorize you to take all remaining Jaegers to the last battle station, Hong Kong. We are prepared to fund you for the next 8 months while the coastal wall is completed. After that, you will receive no further support.
You have your answer, Marshal.
Man, I'm kind of with these guys on the screen. Quit building Jaegers, but don't build that stupid wall, because we all see how that worked out. Let's build some fucking airplanes. Let's see how these kaiju stand up to an A-10 Warthog.
Haven't you heard, Mr. Beckett? The world is coming to an end. So where would you rather die? Here? Or in a Jaeger?
Man, he was really opposed to working with Idris Elba again. And I thought he gave some pretty compelling reasons. But then Idris Elba was like, do you want to die in a Jaeger? And I guess fucking yeah, he does want to die in a Jaeger. Because he just joined the program with no further questions. Nothing else needed, man. Sign me up.
And remain open long enough to get the device through and collapse its structure.
Yeah, and that's where I gotta chime in, because really, I mean, I wouldn't want to go in there with that limited amount of information.
We've got this weird rivalry between these 2 scientists in the research department. One is obsessed with mathematics and wants to save the world using numbers. The other wants to have Avatar hair sex with a kaiju. They present this rivalry as if you would have to choose one type of research over the other, and it doesn't really make any sense. Why would you want this guy's data on your desk, but not this guy's data? And frankly, Math Boy's talking that crazy shit. We're talking about a wormhole at the bottom of the Marianas Trench that leads to Kaiju Land, but the other guy wants to use Avatar hair sex technology to gain an advantage, and that's just fucking out of bounds. I'm not against this idea of the scientist rivalry, I just think the execution wasn't very good. The overacting from these guys is so cringy and forced, and that's saying something considering some of the other characters we see in this movie. We've got to find a replacement for this guy's brother to be his Jaeger co-pilot. Oh, I know. Let's have this weird stick fighting contest where there's almost 0 footwork and bro doesn't take a single hit. And I'm calling bullshit on him winning any of these stick fights. Look at all the cool moves these guys are doing. This is clearly something they trained for, which is why they were hired for this role. Whereas Wife Beater Boy is stiffer than his line delivery. And why are we fighting with sticks? Do the Jaegers hit the kaiju with sticks? Do the kaiju fight back with sticks? Why is melee the primary attack against the kaiju?
I mean, I'm not crazy. You felt it, right? We are drift compatible.
I mean, I just felt like we really had this connection when we were fighting with those sticks. You know what I mean?
I found him prone and he's sort of dazed. I don't exactly know what to do.
I told you it would work.
Bro had Avatar hair sex with a kaiju, so now he can exposit the story all over me, and now I, much like a mother bird feeds her chicks, will exposit it onto you. Basically, the kaiju they've been fighting are being sent by alien overlords from another world to the Marianas Trench through a wormhole. I guess these aliens grow the kaiju like fucking soybeans or something? The kaiju are attacking population centers under orders from these aliens, and this whole time we've only been fighting little baby back bitch kaiju. But now, the alien overlords are getting ready to send in the big dogs and we don't stand a chance. Oh, and dinosaurs were kaiju. Or the kaiju killed the dinosaurs? I don't know, I couldn't really tell what they were trying to say with this dialogue. Here's a scene that really stands out. It was subtly foreshadowed earlier in a way that didn't club you over the head, which is sort of this movie's thing. And then we get to see probably the best acting in this whole movie, which is this little girl running and screaming while this kaiju is chasing her. And I think this is the most immersive scene in the whole movie. It gives a sense of scale and it really makes you feel the terror that this little girl is feeling.
So why don't you just do us all a favor and disappear? It's the only thing you're good at.
So Anime Girl has her meltdown in the Jaeger, but they get everything under control. The next time we see them, they're standing outside of Idris Elba's office with the British guys yelling inside. And then they send out the one who doesn't like our protagonist so that they can have a fight. Most of this fight is cut to pieces with no way of knowing what's even happening, but I do want to give some props because there were a couple times where real martial arts were being used. Right here we see a wizard being used to control an opponent, and then we see an omoplata, which is a real move, but the way they show it is pretty ridiculous. Bro does a flying omoplata, basically somersaulting right onto concrete.
Movement in the breach. Double event. 2 signatures. Dilation indicator. Fast
We're an hour and 6 minutes into this movie, and the kaiju alarm just went off, and all I can think is fucking finally. The story of this movie is so bad. We all came here to see giant monsters get smacked around by Jaegers, and what ensues for the next 25 minutes is actually really epic. The Striker Eureka, the Crimson Typhoon, and the Cherno Alpha all get airdropped off the coast of Hong Kong. The Crimson Typhoon spots the first Jaeger, it does a couple cool maneuvers, and then hurls this giant monster across the harbor so that Cherno can come in with a huge elbow drop and a couple right hooks. Unfortunately, that's the most success these guys had during this fight, and they both get taken out really quick. Crimson Typhoon gets its pilots taken out almost immediately, and then Cherno gets taken out by a kaiju vomit attack on top of getting jumped by the second kaiju. Striker Eureka tries to come to the rescue but can't save Cherno. Right before Eureka is about to shoot its chest cannon, one of the kaiju lets out an EMP blast and shuts the Jaeger down. With all 3 Jaegers down, Idris Elba has no choice but to let the main character jump in Gypsy Danger and go finish this fight scene. With Striker Eureka down because of plot conveniences, I mean the EMP attack, you'd think that the kaiju would kill it just as quick as the first 2 Jaegers, but since the writers aren't done with these 2 British dudes, one kaiju runs off into the city and the other starts playing with its food. This goes on long enough for Gypsy Danger to get airdropped in the harbor so it can beat the shit out of this first kaiju. So they start fighting and Gypsy Danger gets thrown onto land. Here's where we really start seeing the CGI shine. When the Jaegers and kaiju are fighting, the mass and scale are impressed upon you in a way that's very believable. Things are moving fast, but because they're so big, it's not the same as a man fighting. The distances are way further, so it takes longer for Jaeger limbs to move through space. This doesn't feel like a miniature city with a guy in a robot suit walking around. This feels like a real city with skyscrapers and giant monsters running around. So Gypsy Danger goes back and forth with this first kaiju a little bit, but eventually destroys it in a dominant fashion. They look across the harbor and see smoke rising up from the city. They go and confront the second kaiju. Somehow they get a boat and they're gonna use it like a big stick to whack this kaiju. Bro doesn't like that, so he runs away in a very Godzilla 1999 type of way until BOOM! This motherfucker comes busting out a building and they start with the robot kaiju fisticuffs again until finally we find out that this dude can fly. So he picks up Gypsy Danger like an eagle and flies out into space. Eventually, they remember that Gypsy Danger has a sword on board, so they decide to slice and dice Pterodactyl Boy. But now they have a problem. They're in a giant robot, and they're fucking skydiving from space. You might think that these guys are doomed for sure, and you'd be right, except this is a movie, and no, you're wrong, because Idris Elba and the whole cast come out to watch Gypsy Danger fall from space, and somehow bro has a radio that he tells our main protagonist some bullshit so that they can survive crashing into the earth like a fucking meteor. And yeah, that was pretty epic. When people are talking about awesome kaiju fight scenes and awesome CGI, this is what they're talking about.
I'm gonna tell you, I figured out how to drift to the kaiju.
Are you funning me, son?
While the Jaegers have been fighting the two kaiju, Avatar hair sex guy goes into the city to a kaiju goods dealer that sells organs and bone powder and whatever these things are. Always Sunny wants a kaiju brain, and Idris Elba said that this guy could help. There's a little side plot where he almost gets eaten, but after the battle is over in the city, these guys try to harvest the kaiju brain while it's still fresh. Unfortunately, the brain was damaged, but conveniently enough, this kaiju was pregnant in order for the plot to progress and the good guys to get their kaiju brain after all. Something that confuses me about this though is that these guys said that kaijus were all clones of each other and that they were grown, but now we find out that this one is pregnant? So anyways, this little kaiju fetus doesn't have any limbs fully formed, but boy does it have a bloodlust like you wouldn't believe. Such a bloodlust that it rips its way out of the womb and attacks Science Boy. And then it runs out of gas, which would make sense because it's a fetus, except it doesn't die, and Ron Perlman walks up and gets eaten.
You ready for this? Initiating neural handshake in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
The research team has their kaiju brain, and through the wonders of Avatar hair sex technology, they have brain sex with the kaiju fetus. Through this cognitive coitus, our incessant duo find out that you can't just blow up the kaiju wormhole. You have to go through the kaiju wormhole and then blow it up. And it's kind of a wormhole, but it's kind of just underwater, because right before Gypsy Danger melts down its nuclear reactor, both pilots are able to eject in lifeboats that float them from kaiju land through the wormhole that's not a wormhole, and all the way back to the surface of the ocean in like less than a minute. Just a reminder, the breach is at the bottom of the Marianas Trench at a place called Challenger Deep. This is the lowest known point of the ocean on Earth. Can somebody who knows about the ocean and depressurization please explain in the comments all the ways these lifeboats couldn't have achieved this feat? And yeah, that's it. Every Jaeger is dead, along with almost every pilot. Idris Elba and Ron Perlman are dead, so we don't have to worry about bringing them back if there's a sequel. Our protagonists both survive, and everybody lives happily ever after. Pacific Rim is a movie that's fun to watch videos about, but it's not a fun movie to watch. All the badass CGI in the world can't make up for the terrible script and the terrible acting. So much of the dialogue in this movie is beyond cringe. And don't get me wrong, I like a little cringe, but this movie takes itself way too seriously for how dorky and clunky the dialogue is. This movie is entirely carried by the visual effects of 3 or 4 scenes that had kaiju in them. And let's talk about the CGI. It's good, mostly, but it isn't always good. So many times in this movie, you have the most obvious green screen known to man, with a set straight out of an indie film. When people talk about how incredible the CGI is in Pacific Rim, these green screen set pieces are not what they're talking about. They're talking about the monsters and the way that gigantic creatures interact with the water and structures and Jaegers in this world. And I concur with all of this. When the Jaegers and kaiju are on screen moving, it's some of the most immersive cinema you can experience. It doesn't look realistic necessarily, but it looks good. And it's not just about how it looks, it's about how these giant creatures move, and that's what Pacific Rim really nails. Giant monsters fighting each other. But is that enough to make up for everything else? For me, I don't think you have to sacrifice a story just to get cool kaiju fight scenes. I give this movie a 4 out of 10. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate you. If you could like and subscribe, go ahead and comment down below with something funny if you want to help the algorithm. See you on the next video, guys.